Hi, again, welcome. This is our next section of reading Machiavelli's Prince. Today we'll be looking at chapter 23, on what modes flatterers are to be avoided. The question, these sections of the Prince now from between 20 to 25 deal with kind of different examples and different issues, which deals with aspects of things. So we start now, starting with 20, which dealt with on fortresses, right? And then chapter 21 was on what to be esteemed, and 22 was on secretaries. Now this is about the question of what mode about flatterers and how they're to be avoided. Okay, this we're using Machiavelli's Prince translation of Leopold de Alvarez. The link is below to Waveland, the publisher. You can probably, if you want to get a copy, you can still get it from Amazon. You can even get a used one, so it's not a problem, I don't think. These are 4 paragraphs. This is another short chapter in that sense. Chapter begins on page 140 of the Waveland edition. He goes, I do not wish to omit an important heading, and the error from which princes with difficulty defend themselves, comma, if they are not the most prudent, comma, or if they do not choose well. In other words, again, this is tied to ministers, right? This is going to be something tied to ministers, having around them flatterers, okay? And if you're not prudent, right, and you don't choose well, you'll have this problem, okay? Second sentence, and these are the flatterers, of whom courts are full, / for men are so pleased when with their own things, and in this mode deceives themselves that they with difficulty defend themselves from this pestilence, and the wish to defend oneself from it carries the danger of becoming contemptible. Okay, in other words, you have to be careful. Flatterers are very dangerous, because flatterers are people going to say wonderful things and please you, and they're not telling you the truth. What they're doing is what? They're trying to win your favor, okay? And they're dangerous because why? Well, they're dangerous because people see you having them, they see them for what they are, they lose respect for you, okay? They lose respect. You slowly will lose respect. And as you lose respect, you run the risk of becoming contemptible, or being seen as a fool, being seen as someone, and you lose your thing. But in other words, you need to defend yourself from this because it carries the danger of becoming contemptible. In other words, being seen having flatterers or courting flatterers, this will make you contemptible. And this is one of the things you need to, as a prince, to avoid. It's as important as avoid being hated. Because if you are seen as contemptible, you don't have respect, it'll be very difficult, and therefore without respect, you're not able to hold together people. In other words, people's esteem, people's respect. They have no respect for you, they'll act against you, okay? People act against people whom they don't respect and who they don't fear, okay? So therefore, and whom they hate also, okay? Contemptible people are usually not necessarily hated, but they're not feared. If they're not feared, then they'll be acted against them. You'll be acted against, okay? So therefore, this is the danger of this. Comma for the next sentence. For there is no other mode of guarding oneself from flattery, except to have men understand that they will not offend you by telling you the truth, But when everyone is able to tell you the truth, you lack reverence. Okay, here's the problem. If everyone believes they can tell you the truth, then they don't respect you. They don't revere you. But if they fear you to such extent they won't even want to tell you the truth, this is the danger. You're in a trap. They'll try to flatter you. They won't tell you. They'll tell you what you being told what they think you want to hear is not good for a prince. The prince needs to know the truth. But if anyone can come and tell you the truth, what they think of you or what they think, at any time they want, this is the problem. They don't respect you. They don't revere you. And this is a danger in that sense. So this is just to the second paragraph. Therefore, a prudent prince ought to take a third mode, choosing from his state wise men, and only to those ought he give free will to speak the truth to him, but only of those things about which he asks, and nothing else. So this, okay, the first mode is flatterer. The second mode is the people who can tell you truth to you. Both these two things. The third mode is you pick wise people. The first, okay. If everyone is in fear of you, they'll lie to you. They'll flatter you. If you allow them to tell the truth to you, right, what happens is they don't revere you. In both cases, this is bad. Both cases will lead you to kind of contempt. Okay, you're contemptible because you're surrounded by flatterers. Therefore, you're not that good. You're not that great. And likewise, if or you're so bad you only want yes men, you butt lickers and things like that. Or the other thing is that you're too stupid to know who's the good people. And then the other thing is that you're anyone can tell you what they do and they can tell you what they think. In that sense, what ends up happening is they don't respect you, and they say, well, wait a minute, if they don't respect you, if these people don't respect you, why should we respect you in that sense? So therefore, that's a lose-lose situation in the point of view. Even though these people are telling you the truth, that people can tell you the truth without kind of little bit reverence for you, that is problematic. So therefore, he says this is a third mode. Pick wise men who can tell you the truth, but only them, and then only on the things you ask them. This is how that sentence goes. In other words, the third mode, choosing from his state wise men, and only to these to give them free will to speak the truth to him, but only of those things about which he asks, and nothing else. I ask you questions. You don't come to me telling me what to think. I go to you asking you questions. So you can say, tell me the truth, but you just can't come to me and I tell you, hey boss, you should do this and this and this. No. Next sentence. But he ought to, now with the prince, right, he ought to ask them about everything and hear their opinions, and afterwards deliberate by himself in his own mode, semicolon, comma, semicolon, and with these counsels, comma, and with each one of the counselors, comma, he should carry himself in such a mode that everyone will recognize that the more freely he speaks, comma, the more he will be accepted, but from outside of these he ought not to hear and wish to hear anyone. In other words, he does not wish to hear anyone, comma, but ought to stand behind the things deliberated and to be unyielding in those deliberations. Now, this is a footnote 2, and the deliberation is now somewhat archaic, meaning the decisions reached as the result of deliberating. So he should, in other words, I have deliberated, I have made a decision, I made a decision, I should stand by what I decided. Don't change, don't keep on flopping. Whatever you do is, once you make a decision, you stand behind it. In other words, let the people give advice, but once you make your decision, but you should make the decision. Take their advice, take their information, but you separate from them and don't let them make the decision. Seek their advice, seek their knowledge, seek their understanding about like what is good, what is bad, what is the cost, what is the what is the cost, what is the benefit, what is it? Now should we in other words, this idea that a decider should do what the advisor says. This is not Machiavelli would say that's dangerous. Then you're not judging. This is some leaders do this. Things like this is the danger of the so-called bureaucratic administrative state, that let the experts do it. No, the experts are only expert in their thing. They can only give advice. They cannot make decisions. If the leader defers to their judgment, then he has surrendered his decision making and giving it to them. This is why that the movie about that HBO 1990s or 2000s, The Path of War, about Lyndon Johnson's Vietnam situation, where McNamara, in many ways, the whole story of that movie is Johnson, who really is not, he at one sense is letting his he's deferring to his advisors. He's deferring to the men Jack Kennedy brought in, all these brilliant actors like McNamara. But he seems instead thinking that leadership is not him making the judgment, but rather he will make judgments, but he will also make them in the sense he will totally depend upon them in a way that is problematic in that sense. In fact, he will be forced in. He will force himself down a path that he really did not want to go, and in the process, he ruined his presidency. And also destroyed. Caused one of the crises that really harmed America in the late '60s and early '70s. Divided the nation in a sense. Now, what about this? Machiavelli is saying that you need to not, you should rely on the advisors, but you shouldn't let them make the decisions. You make the decision, and whatever it is you make, stick with it. Be resolute about it. Don't back down. Don't let them. Don't let them do what? Don't let them go to talk you back out of doing something. You agree to do something, but then all of a sudden everyone comes in, start talking, trying to change your mind. No, you decide and you stay with it. You stand with it, and you don't let others do things. Now he says, "Who?" Next sentence, in the final sentence of this paragraph, "Who does otherwise is either thrown upon the flatterers, or changes as often as opinions vary. From which it arises that he is little esteemed." What happens? In other words, if I can't make a decision and stand resolutely by it, and I constantly am being moved by whatever dominant opinion sways me, whatever advisor or opinion that comes to sway me, I'm changing always. I'm changeable, and that leads you to be what? Not esteemed. It loses your reputation. It loses people will start to have contempt for you. So you back up to the problem, right? This is that problem. We have a conundrum. The conundrum, if I have flatterers around me, I'll be thought to be, that will lead me to contempt. If I let anyone tell me the truth, that will lead me to contempt. The third mode will work, but you must be resolute. You can't always be letting other people come in. You can let them remember this line. He says what? You should be the asker of opinions. You should be very active, asking them questions, ask them everything. But once they have spoken, you go make your decision. Don't rely on them for the decision. You make your own decision. And then what you should do, you should stick to it. Whatever you make your decision, carry him such a mode that everyone recognizes the more freely he speaks, the more you be accepted by outsides, not to ish anyone else, in other words. And to stand behind the thing deliberated and be unyielding in his deliberation. So once you made your decision, you're unyielding. You're not going to change your mind. Now, next, this is the third paragraph. I wish on this point to adduce to the modern example of Prix de Lucca, a man of the present emperor Maximilianus, when speaking with His Majesty, said that he would not take counsel with anyone, and would not do anything according to his own mode. Period. Now, this is Lucuda Bramali, the bishop, ambassador to the council of Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor. Right. Now he's saying this man, what he won't take counsel. In other words, Maximilian is what? When speaking of His Majesty the Emperor, he said that he would not take counsel with anyone, so he doesn't take counsel with anyone, and he would not do anything according to his own mode. In other words, he wouldn't do anything his own way of doing it. Thus arose from taking measures contrary to the one stated above. In other words, this arose from taking measures contrary to one stated above. In other words, this is what he said. do the third mode. Instead, he does it contrary to that. In other words, you take it. Machiavelli says what you should do is take wise people, let them speak, and only on the speaking things that you tell, but ask them everything. You then make your decision and be unyielding. So how does the emperor behave? The complete opposite of Machiavelli. What Machiavelli says you should do. In other words, the Emperor Maximilian is a negative role model. Don't do. Maximilian does everything wrong. He says, in other words, and would not do anything according to his own mode. This arose from taking measures contrary to the one stated above. My measures, period. Since the emperor is a secretive man, he does not communicate his plans to anyone, he does not take opinions, but they begin to be known and discovered as he puts those plans into effect, they begin to be contradicted by those around him, and he is very easily persuaded by them, period. Okay, this explains what happened. He doesn't communicate effectively to others. He's distrustful and he's secretive. He's secretive, right? Doesn't communicate his plans to anyone, and does not take opinions. And then he starts something, and then people become aware of it, and then people start saying, "No, it's not a good idea," and they start letting their opinions known. And then he starts having doubts, right? And is he persuaded by the doubters criticizing him to kind of change his mind another way? And then they will tell him to change his mind again, and that is irresolute in that sense. And from whence it arises that those things that are done one day are destroyed the next, and no one ever understands what he wants or plans to do, and no one is able to base himself upon his deliberation. In other words, you don't know what he's thinking, you don't know how he's making his decisions, so you can't kind of base yourself or kind of understand. In other words, he's so contradictory and he's so secretive and he's so kind of mercurial in that sense. The emperor was that you couldn't kind of know what he wanted or know what and therefore kind of help him even get what he wanted. Okay, this is why he's a really bad example of this kind of situation. And therefore, no one is able to base himself on his deliberations. Period. And the last paragraph on page 141. A prince, therefore, ought, ought always to take counsel, but only when he wishes to do so, and not when others wish, In other words, you should always take counsel, but only when you wish, not when others wish, And indeed, he ought to take the heart out of anyone counseling him on anything when he does not ask for it. In other words, he should take literally rip the heart out of it. In other words, the heart means the spirit. You should kind of put him down. I don't think they say rip out the heart of him, but they should do metaphor. This is how they should feel. Like they've just, I don't want to hear from you. I do want to hear from you. Shut up. In your spirit is crushed. It's really, you just why? Because you should ask, you should know, but what you want to know. Don't them coming to you saying, "Hey, you should be doing this." This assumes that they know better. No. Other words, rip the heart out of anyone counseling him on anything when he does not ask for it. If you don't ask for it and I tell you to, don't put up with that. Next sentence. But he ought very much to be an asker at large, and then a patient hearer of the truth about what is being asked. So, in other words, you have to be patient hearer. If you ask them stuff, you should ask at large. You, the prince, should be asking a lot, inquiring a lot, and then patiently hearing what the people who you've asked telling you. Don't be no. Patient hearer. In other words, if people coming to you telling you what to do, you didn't ask them, crush them. rip their heart out so that they wouldn't dare do that. Shows that you're the boss. But you should be asking. You shouldn't have to wait. You should be asking the question that you need to know. You shouldn't. Some stranger shouldn't come up to you and say, "Hey, Prince." Well, that's bad for your reputation. Okay, but you need to. But by the way, if he comes there with real advice and you didn't ask, that's your fault. You have to. In other words, if you're not asking the right people the right questions, that's your bad. Okay, and in other words, you're controlling your own fate here. So, therefore, you should ask at large, be patient here, and indeed, when someone understands that someone, because of some reservation, do not. In other words, here, this is the same sentence is, be patient here of the things asked, semicolon, and indeed, when he understands that someone, because of some reservation, comma, does not speak the truth, he should be disturbed by it. In other words, someone is not. You ask them and they're kind of not wanting to tell you the truth. You should be disturbed by that. That something's wrong. That's a problem. There's something going on here. Why are they doing that? You better know what's going on. Maybe they're maybe they're plotting against you or something like this. Who don't know what's going on. Many judge that a prince who gains for himself the opinion of being a prudent man is so because is held not because of his nature, but because of the good counselors that he has around him. And doubtless they deceive themselves. In other words, again, this idea. In other words, everyone thinks that the counselors. No. This idea that he's a good man because he has good counselors. No. You're a good man because you're a good man, and that and being the prudent man allows you to pick good counselors. You're deceiving it that you think the counselors make him good. No. Or make him prudent. No. He must be prudent on his own. So there's no third option. There's no middle option here. Either you are prudent or you're not. There's no kind of optional three. No, someone else will make you prudent. Give you prudence. Other people can give you prudence. No. You can't rely on the advisors to give you prudence. They only give you advice. They can only give you information. You must make the judgment. So, what does he say here? In other words, many judge that again a prince for himself of opinions of a prudent man because not because of his nature, but because of the good counselors. This doubtless they deceive themselves, in the next sentence. For this is a general rule, which never fails. Okay, this is a general rule that never fails. A prince who is not wise himself cannot be counseled, unless by chance he consigns himself to one who alone will wholly govern him, and who himself is the most prudent man. This idea you have to you make yourself a slave to the one who is truly a prudent man. Well, how's that being prince then? The prince either is going to be what? Repeat this line. General rule which never fails. A prince who is not wise cannot be well counseled, unless he consigns himself to one who will wholly govern him, and who himself is a most prudent man. In other words, this is the famous joke. The Alvarez always told me about the joke about this, and this is, if you know your story, P.G. Wodehouse novels, Bertie Wooster. Bertie Wooster had a manservant, Jeeves. Bertie lets Jeeves make his decisions for him, real decisions for him. That you'd have to, again, this is the idea, that you'd have a prince who's in other words, a prince who really is letting his manservant or advisor be his ruler, the judge, decision maker. This is what Machiavelli is suggesting here. This is the only way you don't get out of ruin. But this is a bad choice. This is not a good choice, because who's really the prince? Is it the prince or the advisor? The advisor's the prince. You've made himself, what he says here, he consigned himself over to a more prudent man. And in this case, he could well be, but it would not last long, for that governor of his, in a short time, will take away the state from him, period. In other words, that's the danger of it, right? He would take away the state from him. And the only reason why Bertie's not a statesman, Bertie's a private person. So a private person can get away with that, but not a prince, not a ruler. Because what will happen is if that's his, if he is actually ruling, then he will take over. Next sentence. But, comma, if he takes counsel from more than one, comma, an unwise prince will never have unanimous counsel, and he will never know how by himself how to reconcile them, semicolon. For as the counselor, each one will think of his own interests, comma, and the prince will not know how to correct or understand them. So therefore, he won't be able to correct them to make sure they look at their own interest, and he won't know how to understand what they're doing. Okay. Next sentence. And it is not possible to find it otherwise, comma, for men always turn out badly for you, unless by some necessity they are made good. In other words, people will always turn out bad for you, unless by some necessity they are made good for you. It is therefore, next sentence, therefore to be concluded that good counsel, from whomever they may come, needs must arise from the prudence of the prince, and not the prudence of the prince from the good counselors. So he ends on this line that in other words, the good counselors you get, the good advice you get, is because of your prudence. Your prudence will allow you to get people who will give you good advice. So again, read that. It is therefore come to concluded that good counsels, people who give you good advice, and this is about flattery, right? Okay, the ones who give you the good advice, not flattering you, and not they are what whatever they may come, whomever they may come, needs must arise from the prudence of the prince. Not the prudence of the prince comes from the counselors. That's how it ends. In other words, what he's saying here is saying that you can't. In other words, you're making the decisions. You got to have the prudence. You need the being able to make the judgments. Of course, you might have to rely on some people for additional information about special information that you might not have, but you must make the decision, not them. And this chapter is all about this question, about how you should handle it, how you should go about it, how to avoid going about it. And then the question of, and also knowing the dangers of it. And you have to, and it's this idea that you can be the middle kind, that you don't really know what they're doing, but you can learn from somebody. No, you have to know, you need to be able to decide who's a good teacher, who's not a good teacher. Therefore, in other words, you have to have the first mind. The mind who can discern, the mind who can invent, to make the mind that can deliberate, to make decisions. If you're not able to make decisions and have the ability to stick by them, you're going to be insolvent. You're going to flip and flop and go about. And this is why this is the danger. This is contempt. This is the way a prince or a ruler becomes held in contempt. And they lose their esteem and they're held in contempt. Therefore, once they lose their esteem and held in contempt, what happens? People will act against you. They'll plot against you. They'll move against you. You're in trouble. And if you don't have the judgment to know how to respond to it, how to fix it, you're SOL, as they say, shit out of luck. Well, okay, this is a short chapter, and we're at the end. I don't want to continue making this too long, because I've been trying to make these chapters stick to only one chapter at a time. If you've liked this, if you have any questions, please put the comments below. I will respond to it. If you have any concerns or comments, again, we're using the D'Albrecht translation. The link on the Waveland site that is below. If you like this, please put a thumbs up. Say like, share it with a friend, share it on social media. You can, if you want to see more of these, please subscribe and you'll get notifications. Also, if you want to follow me on social media, the links are below. If you have, again, this is nice seeing you guys, and see you next time we have our next session. And we'll continue on the last sections of the Prince. Next chapter will be, I think, will be on 24, which is 24, 25, and 26, last two chapters. So take care and goodbye.